My mother-in-law broke into our house and destroyed my wedding dress while I was at work. The worst part is my husband helped her plan it. When I confronted them both, she said I deserved it for being a bad wife, and he still took her side. My husband Jonathan, 31M, and I, 28F, have been married for 3 years. His mother Grace, 56F, has always been difficult, but what happened last week crossed every line I thought existed. Let me give you some background first. Jonathan and I met in college and dated for 4 years before getting married. His mother Grace never liked me from the start. When we first started dating, she would make comments about how I wasn't good enough for her son. She told Jonathan I was too independent and that I would never make a good wife. During our engagement, she tried to convince him to call off the wedding multiple times. She said things like I was only marrying him for his money, which was ridiculous because we both work similar jobs and make about the same amount. The wedding planning was a nightmare because of her. She wanted to control every detail and threw tantrums when we didn't do what she wanted. She insisted on inviting her entire extended family, most of whom Jonathan barely knew. She also demanded that her best friend's daughter be one of my bridesmaids instead of my college roommate. When I said no, she didn't speak to us for 2 months. Jonathan always took her side during these fights, saying I needed to understand that she just wanted to be involved. After we got married, things got worse instead of better. She would show up at our house unannounced and let herself in with the spare key Jonathan had given her. I came home from work several times to find her rearranging our furniture or doing our laundry. When I told Jonathan this made me uncomfortable, he said his mom was just trying to help and that I should be grateful. She would also call him multiple times a day, sometimes even during our date nights or when we were spending time together. The breaking point came about 6 months ago when Grace started spreading rumors about me to Jonathan's family. She told his aunts and cousins that I was preventing Jonathan from visiting her and that I was trying to turn him against his own mother. None of this was true. I never stopped Jonathan from seeing his mother. I just asked that she call before coming over and respect our privacy as a married couple. But Grace twisted everything to make me look like the villain. Things escalated when Jonathan's cousin Phoebe, 29F, got engaged last month. Grace immediately started comparing Phoebe's relationship to ours, telling anyone who would listen that Phoebe was a much better partner than I was. She said Phoebe was more traditional and family-oriented, unlike me who was too focused on my career. This hurt because I work as a nurse and I've always been proud of helping people, but Grace made it sound like having a job was somehow wrong. The wedding dress incident happened last Tuesday. I keep my wedding dress in our bedroom closet in a special preservation box. It cost $1,200 and has sentimental value because my grandmother helped me pick it out before she passed away last year. My grandmother and I were very close, and choosing that dress together was one of our last special moments. I worked a double shift at the hospital that day and didn't get home until almost midnight. I was exhausted and just wanted to sleep. When I woke up the next morning and went to get ready for work, I noticed something was wrong in our bedroom. The closet door was slightly open, which was unusual because I always keep it closed. Then I saw pieces of white fabric on the floor. I opened the closet and found my wedding dress box open and empty. The dress was on the floor, cut into pieces. Someone had taken scissors to it and destroyed it completely. The bodice was separated from the skirt, the sleeves were cut off, and there were random cuts all through the fabric. Years of careful preservation were ruined in one night. I started shaking and called for Jonathan, but he had already left for work. I called him immediately and told him what happened. He said he would come home right away. While I waited for him, I looked around the house for signs of how someone got in. The front door was still locked, and all the windows were secure. Then I remembered that Grace still had our spare key. When Jonathan got home, I showed him the destroyed dress and asked if he thought his mother could have done this. He looked shocked and said there was no way she would do something like that. He suggested maybe we had been robbed, but nothing else in the house was missing or disturbed. I told him I wanted to call the police, but he asked me to wait until we could figure out what really happened. That afternoon, Jonathan went to his mother's house to ask her about it. He came back and said she denied everything and seemed genuinely surprised when he told her about the dress. She suggested that maybe I had done it myself for attention or insurance money. This made me even more upset because not only was she destroying my property, she was now trying to make me look crazy. I decided to call Grace myself and confront her directly. When she answered the phone, I asked her straight out if she had been in our house and cut up my dress. She was quiet for a long moment, then said she didn't know what I was talking about. But her voice sounded different, like she was lying. I told her I knew she still had our spare key and that she was the only person who could have gotten in. That's when she finally admitted it. She said she had come over Tuesday night while we were both supposed to be asleep. She didn't know I was working late. She said she cut up the dress because she was tired of me acting like I was better than everyone else and that the dress represented everything wrong with our marriage. She said I had never deserved to wear such a beautiful dress because I wasn't a good enough wife for her son. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had broken into our house and destroyed something that meant everything to me, and she was acting like I somehow deserved it. I asked her how she could justify destroying something that belonged to someone else, especially something with such sentimental value. She said maybe now I would understand how she felt when I married her son and ruined their close relationship. This conversation happened while Jonathan was in the room with me, and he heard everything she said. I expected him to be as outraged as I was, but instead he just sat there looking uncomfortable. When I hung up the phone, I asked him what he thought we should do. He said maybe we should all sit down and talk about this like adults. I told Jonathan I wanted Grace to pay for a new dress and to return our spare key immediately. I also said I didn't want her coming to our house anymore without permission. Jonathan said those seemed like reasonable requests and that he would talk to his mother about making things right. The next day, Jonathan went to see Grace again. When he came back, he said she had refused to pay for the dress and that she thought I was overreacting. She said it was just a dress that I would never wear again anyway, so what was the big deal? She also said she wouldn't give back the spare key because Jonathan had given it to her and it wasn't my decision to take it away. At this point, I realized that Grace was never going to take responsibility for what she did or try to make it right. I also realized that Jonathan wasn't going to stand up to her in any meaningful way. He kept saying he understood both sides and that we all needed to find a way to get along. I started looking into filing a police report for breaking and entering and destruction of property. When I mentioned this to Jonathan, he got upset and said I was trying to get his mother arrested over a dress. He said his family would never forgive me if I involved the police, and that I was being vindictive. That's when I realized that Jonathan cared more about keeping his mother happy than protecting me or our marriage. After 3 years together, he was still choosing her over me when it really mattered. I told him I needed some time to think about everything, and I've been staying at my sister's house for the past 3 days. Jonathan has been calling and texting constantly, saying he wants to work things out. He keeps saying his mother was wrong but that involving the police would just make everything worse. He wants me to come home so we can move past this and focus on our marriage. But I don't know if I can move past this. It's not just about the dress, although that was important to me. It's about the fact that his mother violated our home and our privacy, destroyed something precious to me, and then refused to take any responsibility for her actions. And Jonathan is more concerned about protecting her from consequences than he is about how this affected me. I keep thinking about my grandmother and how excited she was when we found that dress together. She said it made me look like a princess and that she couldn't wait to see pictures of me wearing it on my wedding day. Now those pictures are the only place that dress exists anymore. I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to file the police report anyway and let Jonathan deal with the fallout. Another part of me wonders if I should just cut my losses and start over somewhere else. I can't imagine living with someone who won't protect me from his mother's attacks, and I can't imagine having Grace as part of my life for the next however many years. Has anyone else dealt with something like this? How do you move forward when your spouse's family destroys your property and your spouse won't stand up for you? Update 1. I wanted to update everyone who commented on my original post about my mother-in-law Grace destroying my wedding dress. A lot has happened since then, and I need to get this all written down because I still can't believe how everything unfolded. First, thank you to everyone who validated my feelings and gave me advice. Reading your responses helped me realize I wasn't overreacting and that what Grace did was not normal family drama. Several people suggested I file a police report regardless of what Jonathan wanted, and others recommended I look into getting the locks changed. I wish I had listened to that second piece of advice sooner. After staying at my sister's house for a week, I decided to go back home and try to work things out with Jonathan. He had been calling me every day saying he missed me and that he had talked to his mother about boundaries. He promised that Grace had agreed to stay away from our house and that she understood she had crossed a line with the dress situation. I wanted to believe him because despite everything, I still loved my husband and wanted our marriage to work. We had built a life together, bought a house, adopted our dog Charlie, and I wasn't ready to throw all of that away without giving it one more chance. When I got home, Jonathan had cleaned the house and bought me flowers. He apologized again for not standing up to his mother sooner and said he realized he had been putting her feelings ahead of mine. He promised that from now on, our marriage would come first. We talked for hours about setting boundaries with Grace and about how to rebuild trust between us. For about a week, things seemed better. Grace didn't come by the house or call as much as usual. Jonathan was making an effort to spend more time with me and less time on the phone with his mother. I started to think maybe we could actually work through this and come out stronger. Then last Friday happened, and everything fell apart again. I was at work when my neighbor Mrs. Peterson called me. She's an older woman who lives next door and has always been friendly with us. She told me she had seen Grace's car in our driveway around lunchtime and thought I should know since Grace had been there for over an hour. This immediately made me suspicious because Jonathan was supposed to be at work, and we had agreed that Grace wouldn't come to the house anymore without both of us being present. I tried calling Jonathan, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I was in the middle of a busy shift and couldn't leave right away, but I kept trying to reach him throughout the afternoon. When I finally got home that evening, Jonathan was already there making dinner like nothing had happened. I asked him about Grace's visit, and he said he didn't know what I was talking about. He claimed he had been at work all day and that his mother hadn't been to the house. I told him about Mrs. Peterson's call, and that's when his story started changing. First he said maybe Grace had stopped by briefly to drop something off. Then he said she might have come by to get something she had forgotten. Finally, he admitted that yes, she had been there, but it was only for a few minutes and nothing important had happened. I asked him why he had lied to me about it, especially after we had just agreed on complete honesty about his mother. He said he hadn't wanted to upset me over nothing and that he thought it would be better if I didn't know about every little interaction he had with Grace. This made me realize that Jonathan still didn't understand the problem. It wasn't about him talking to his mother, it was about him lying to me and breaking the agreements we had made together. I told him I needed to know the truth about what Grace had been doing in our house for over an hour. That's when Jonathan finally told me the real story. Grace had called him at work that morning crying and saying she needed to talk to him urgently. She said she was having chest pains and thought she might be having a heart attack. Jonathan immediately left work and met her at our house because she said she was too scared to drive herself to the hospital. When he got there, Grace was sitting in her car in our driveway looking fine. She said the chest pains had stopped but that she was still worried about her health. She asked if she could come inside to rest for a while before driving home. Jonathan let her in and made her some tea while she sat on our couch. According to Jonathan, they just talked about her health concerns and about how stressed she had been lately. She apologized again for the wedding dress incident and said she had been going through a difficult time emotionally. She promised Jonathan that she wanted to repair her relationship with me and make things right. But then Jonathan mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He said that while Grace was resting, she had asked to use our bathroom. She was upstairs for about 20 minutes, which Jonathan thought was strange, but he didn't want to question her if she wasn't feeling well. I immediately went upstairs to check our bedroom and bathroom. At first, everything looked normal. But then I noticed that some of my jewelry was in different positions on my dresser. My laptop, which I usually keep closed on my desk, was open. And when I checked my closet, I could tell that someone had gone through my clothes. I confronted Jonathan about this, and he insisted that Grace wouldn't have gone through our personal things. He said maybe I was remembering wrong about where I had left things. But I know my own belongings, and I know someone had been going through them. The next morning, I discovered what Grace had really been doing upstairs. I was getting ready for work when I noticed that my birth control pills were missing from my bathroom cabinet. I always keep them in the same spot, and they were definitely gone. I searched the entire bathroom and bedroom but couldn't find them anywhere. Then I checked the trash can and found the empty pill pack at the bottom, underneath other garbage. Someone had taken out all of my birth control pills and thrown them away. I called Jonathan immediately and told him what I had found. At first, he didn't believe me and suggested that maybe I had thrown them away myself and forgotten. When I insisted that wasn't true, he said maybe Charlie had somehow gotten into the cabinet and scattered the pills. But I knew what had really happened. Grace had gone through our personal belongings while Jonathan was downstairs, found my birth control pills, and destroyed them. This wasn't random or accidental. She had specifically targeted something that would affect my ability to control my own reproductive choices. When I explained this to Jonathan, he finally admitted that it was possible his mother had done it. But instead of being outraged like I expected, he asked me why it was such a big deal since we could just get a new prescription. I couldn't believe he was still minimizing his mother's actions. She had violated our privacy, gone through our personal belongings, and tampered with my medication. This wasn't about the cost of replacing the pills, it was about the fact that she felt entitled to interfere with the most personal aspects of my life. I asked Jonathan what he planned to do about this latest incident. He said he would talk to Grace and ask her to admit what she had done. When I said that wasn't enough and that I wanted him to demand she stay away from our house permanently, he said that would be too harsh and might damage their relationship permanently. That's when I realized that Jonathan was never going to prioritize our marriage over his relationship with his mother. No matter what Grace did, he would always find ways to excuse her behavior and minimize the impact on me. He was more worried about hurting his mother's feelings than protecting his wife from her attacks. I told Jonathan I was going back to my sister's house and that I needed time to decide whether our marriage was worth saving. He begged me not to leave again and promised that this time he would really set boundaries with Grace. But I had heard those promises before, and his actions had shown me that his words didn't mean anything. I've been at my sister's house for the past week, and Jonathan has been calling constantly. He says Grace has admitted to throwing away my birth control and that she's very sorry. He says she only did it because she wants us to have children and thought maybe if we had a baby, it would bring our family closer together. The fact that Jonathan thinks this explanation somehow makes Grace's actions acceptable tells me everything I need to know about where his priorities really lie. I'm starting to think this marriage might be over. Update 2: I've been putting off writing this update because I wasn't sure how much detail to include, but after what happened this week, I think I need to tell the whole story. The situation with Jonathan and Grace has gotten much worse, and I've discovered that their behavior was even more calculated than I originally realized. After my last update, I stayed at my sister's house for another 2 weeks while Jonathan continued to call and text me every day. He kept saying that Grace was sorry and that they both wanted to make things right. He suggested we all meet for dinner so Grace could apologize in person and we could start fresh. Against my better judgment, I agreed to one final conversation with both of them. I thought maybe if Grace could acknowledge what she had done and agree to stay out of our lives, there might be a chance to save my marriage. I told Jonathan I would meet them at a restaurant, not at our house, and that this was their last opportunity to make things right. We met at a chain restaurant near their neighborhood last Saturday afternoon. Grace was already there when I arrived, sitting next to Jonathan in a booth. She looked perfectly normal, not like someone who was sorry for destroying my property and violating my privacy. When I sat down, Grace immediately started talking about how glad she was that we could all be together as a family again. She said she had been praying for me to come to my senses and realize that family was more important than holding grudges. She never actually apologized for anything she had done. I asked Grace directly if she was sorry for cutting up my wedding dress and for going through my personal belongings. She said she understood why I was upset, but that sometimes people do things out of love that might seem hurtful at the time. She said everything she had done was because she wanted what was best for Jonathan and our marriage. When I asked her specifically about throwing away my birth control pills, she said she thought Jonathan and I should be focusing on starting a family instead of preventing one. She said most women our age were already mothers and that I was being selfish by putting my career ahead of giving Jonathan children. I pointed out that whether or not Jonathan and I had children was none of her business and that she had no right to interfere with my medical decisions. Grace said that as Jonathan's mother, she had every right to be concerned about his happiness and his future. She said if I really loved him, I would want to give him the family he deserved. Jonathan sat there through this entire conversation without saying a word to defend me or correct his mother. When I asked him directly if he agreed with what Grace was saying, he said he just wanted everyone to get along and that we should focus on moving forward instead of rehashing the past. That's when I realized this meeting was never about Grace apologizing, it was about them trying to convince me to accept her behavior and pretend nothing had happened. They wanted me to come home and continue the marriage on their terms, with Grace remaining involved in every aspect of our lives. I told them both that I couldn't do that and that I needed Grace to stay completely out of my life if there was any chance of fixing my marriage with Jonathan. Grace said that was impossible because Jonathan was her son and she would always be part of his life. She said if I couldn't accept that, then maybe I wasn't the right wife for him. Jonathan finally spoke up, but not to support me. He said his mother would always be important to him and that he hoped someday I could learn to appreciate her like he did. He said he didn't want to choose between us, but that he couldn't cut his mother out of his life just to make me happy. I left the restaurant that day knowing my marriage was over. Jonathan had made his choice, and it wasn't me. But the real revelation came this week when I went back to our house to get more of my belongings. Jonathan was at work, and I still had my key. I wanted to pack up my clothes and some personal items so I could start looking for my own apartment. While I was packing, I found a box of papers in Jonathan's nightstand drawer that I had never seen before. Most of it was random stuff, old bills, warranty information, things like that. But at the bottom of the box, I found a notebook that had Jonathan's handwriting in it. The notebook contained what looked like a timeline of events from the past few months. Jonathan had written down dates and notes about conversations he had with Grace about me. Reading through it, I realized that Grace's attacks on me hadn't been random acts of anger, they had been part of a planned campaign to drive me away. According to Jonathan's notes, Grace had started complaining to him about me shortly after we got married. She told him I was controlling and that I was trying to isolate him from his family. She suggested that maybe I wasn't as committed to the marriage as I seemed and that he should watch for signs that I was planning to leave him. The notes showed that Grace had been feeding Jonathan specific stories about me for months. She told him she had seen me having lunch with male coworkers and suggested I might be cheating. She said she had noticed that I seemed distant and unaffectionate and that maybe I was having second thoughts about being married. Most disturbing of all, the notes revealed that Grace had suggested destroying my wedding dress as a way to test my reaction. She told Jonathan that if I really cared about our marriage, I would forget the dress incident and try harder to get along with her. But if I made a big deal about it, that would prove I cared more about material things than about family. The birth control incident had also been planned. Grace had convinced Jonathan that if we had a baby, it would strengthen our marriage and give me something to focus on besides my complaints about her. She suggested that maybe I needed a little push to realize that motherhood was more important than my career. What made this discovery even worse was that Jonathan had been documenting these conversations in detail, which meant he was actively participating in Grace's schemes against me. He wasn't just a passive victim of his mother's manipulation, he was helping her plan ways to control and manipulate me. The final entry in the notebook was dated the day before our restaurant meeting. Jonathan had written that Grace thought the dinner was a good opportunity to make me understand that she would always be part of our lives. If I couldn't accept that, then it would be better for everyone if I left permanently. Reading those notes, I realized that the past several months of my life had been orchestrated by my husband and his mother. They had been working together to make me feel crazy, isolated, and wrong about everything. When their subtle manipulation didn't work, they escalated to destroying my property and violating my privacy. I took pictures of every page in that notebook with my phone, then put it back where I found it. I finished packing my things and left our house for what I knew would be the last time. That evening, I sent Jonathan a text message telling him I had found his notebook and that I knew about his collaboration with Grace. I told him I was filing for divorce and that he shouldn't contact me anymore except through lawyers. Jonathan called me immediately, but I didn't answer. He left several voicemails saying the notebook didn't mean what I thought it meant and that he had only been trying to understand his mother's concerns about our marriage. He said he loved me and that everything he had done was because he wanted our marriage to work. But I was done listening to his explanations and excuses. For months, he had been pretending to be caught in the middle between me and his mother, when in reality he had been working with her against me the entire time. I met with a divorce lawyer yesterday, and she said I have a strong case for emotional abuse and destruction of property. She also said the notebook could be important evidence if Grace's harassment continues after the divorce. I'm staying with my sister while I look for my own place. It's been hard starting over, but also liberating to be away from the constant stress and manipulation. I finally feel like I can make decisions based on what's best for me instead of constantly trying to manage other people's emotions and schemes. Jonathan has been trying to contact me through mutual friends and family members, but I've asked everyone not to pass along his messages. I'm ready to close this chapter of my life and move forward without him or Grace in it. Update 3: This will be my final update on this situation. The divorce proceedings have been moving forward, and I wanted to share what happened during the final confrontation with Jonathan and Grace before I close this chapter completely. 3 weeks ago, Jonathan showed up at my sister's house unannounced. I wasn't there at the time, but my sister Katie told him I didn't want to see him and asked him to leave. He refused and said he needed to talk to me about some important information regarding our divorce. Katie called me at work to let me know Jonathan was there and wouldn't leave. I told her to call the police if he didn't go away, but she said he seemed calm and that maybe I should hear what he had to say. Against my better judgment, I agreed to come home and listen to whatever he wanted to tell me. When I got there, Jonathan was sitting in Katie's living room looking terrible. He had lost weight and looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. He immediately started apologizing and saying he had made huge mistakes. He said he had been thinking about everything that happened and realized how wrong he had been. Jonathan told me that after I left, Grace had been calling him multiple times every day to complain about the divorce. She kept saying it was all my fault for being too sensitive and that Jonathan should find a new wife who would appreciate having such a caring mother-in-law. She also started pressuring him to fight the divorce and try to get me to come back. According to Jonathan, Grace's constant criticism finally made him realize how controlling and manipulative she had always been. He said he had been so used to her behavior his entire life that he didn't recognize it as abnormal until he started seeing it affect our marriage. Jonathan said he had decided to go to counseling to work on setting boundaries with his mother. He claimed he understood now that his first loyalty should have been to me and our marriage, not to keeping Grace happy. He begged me to give him another chance to prove he could change. I listened to everything Jonathan said, but I didn't believe him. He had made similar promises before, and his actions had never matched his words. I told him it was too late for counseling and second chances. Too much damage had been done for me to ever trust him again. That's when Jonathan told me the real reason he had come to see me. He said Grace had been talking about doing something to interfere with our divorce proceedings. She had been asking questions about my lawyer and about what kind of settlement I might get. She also mentioned that she knew where I was staying and that maybe she should pay me a visit to convince me to be more reasonable. Jonathan said he was worried about what his mother might do and that he wanted to warn me to be careful. He also said he had finally told Grace that their relationship was over if she didn't stop interfering in his life, but he wasn't sure she believed him. I thanked Jonathan for the warning, but I told him this conversation didn't change anything between us. The divorce was still moving forward, and I still didn't want him in my life. I asked him to leave and not contact me again. After Jonathan left, I called my lawyer to tell her about Grace's potential plans to interfere with the divorce. She advised me to document any contact Grace tried to make and to call the police immediately if she showed up at Katie's house or my workplace. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Grace appeared at the hospital where I work. She came to the nurse's station during my shift and asked to speak with me privately. My supervisor happened to be nearby and asked Grace if she was a patient or family member. When Grace said no, my supervisor told her she couldn't be in the patient care area without authorization. Grace became agitated and started talking loudly about how I was her daughter-in-law and that she had important family business to discuss with me. She said I was destroying her son's life and that someone needed to talk sense into me before I made a terrible mistake. Security was called when Grace refused to leave the unit. She kept saying she just needed 5 minutes to explain everything to me and that I would understand once I heard her side of the story. The security guards had to escort her out of the building while she was still talking about how ungrateful and selfish I was being. My supervisor filed an incident report about Grace's visit, and I gave a copy to my lawyer. We used this incident as evidence that Grace was harassing me and potentially interfering with my ability to work. My lawyer sent Grace a cease and desist letter warning her to stay away from me and my workplace. The letter must have made an impression because Grace hired her own lawyer. Her attorney contacted mine to say that Grace felt she was being unfairly blamed for the breakdown of my marriage. Grace wanted it on record that she had always tried to have a good relationship with me and that she was hurt by my accusations against her. Grace's lawyer also claimed that Jonathan's notebook was being taken out of context and that the conversations documented in it were just a concerned mother trying to help her son work through marital problems. They said Grace never intended to cause any harm and that she was willing to apologize if that would help resolve the situation. My lawyer responded that Grace's apologies weren't sufficient given the pattern of harassment and property destruction. We made it clear that I wanted no contact with Grace going forward and that any further interference would result in additional legal action. The divorce was finalized last week. Jonathan didn't contest any of my requests, which surprised me. I got to keep most of our shared belongings, including our dog Charlie. Jonathan kept the house, but he had to buy out my portion of the equity. I also received compensation for my destroyed wedding dress and other damaged property. At the final hearing, Jonathan's lawyer mentioned that Jonathan was planning to move to a different state for a new job opportunity. I don't know if this is true or if it's just his way of getting away from the situation he created with his mother. I haven't heard from Grace since her lawyer contacted mine, and I hope it stays that way. I changed my phone number and asked my workplace to flag her name in case she tries to contact me there again. Moving forward has been easier than I expected. I found a nice apartment close to Katie's house, and I've been spending more time with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. It's amazing how much energy I have now that I'm not constantly dealing with Grace's drama and Jonathan's inability to stand up to her. I've also been dating someone new. His name is David, and he's a teacher I met through mutual friends. The best part about David is that he has a normal relationship with his family. His parents are kind, respectful people who treat me well without trying to control every aspect of our relationship. When I told David about everything that happened with Jonathan and Grace, he was shocked that any mother-in-law would think that kind of behavior was acceptable. He said his own mother would be horrified if she acted that way towards someone he cared about. It's been refreshing to be with someone whose family operates by normal boundaries and respect. I know some people might think I gave up on my marriage too easily, but I don't regret my decision. Jonathan had 3 years to show me that our relationship was his priority, and instead he chose to participate in his mother's schemes to control and manipulate me. Some damage can't be undone, and some trust can't be rebuilt. I'm sharing this final update because I want other people in similar situations to know that you don't have to accept toxic behavior from your in-laws or your spouse. You don't have to sacrifice your peace of mind and self-respect to keep other people happy. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to walk away and build a better life without the people who are determined to make you miserable. For anyone dealing with manipulative in-laws and unsupportive spouses, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're overreacting or being too sensitive when someone is treating you badly. You deserve to be with people who respect you and treat you well. That's the end of this story. I'm looking forward to whatever comes next. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2: I caught my husband cheating and divorced him. Later, my ex-husband's AP revealed his sister knew about their 3-year affair. I, 34F, was married to Eric, 36M, for 8 years before our divorce last year. We met during our junior year of college at a mutual friend's party. I remember being drawn to his charismatic personality and infectious laugh. We started dating a few months later and things moved quickly from there. Eric came from a tight-knit family that seemed picture-perfect from the outside. His older sister Vanessa, 39F, and I hit it off right away, bonding over our shared love of true crime podcasts and hiking. Vanessa was married to Nathan, 41M, and they had 2 kids, a 7-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. Eric's parents, especially his mom Karen, 62F, welcomed me with open arms and treated me like the daughter they never had. After graduating college, Eric and I both landed jobs at the same tech startup. We loved the excitement of working for a young company, and our shared career goals brought us even closer. We got married in a small ceremony in Eric's parents' backyard, surrounded by family and close friends. The first few years of our marriage were wonderful. We traveled, advanced in our careers, and started talking about having kids of our own. Things started to change about 3 years ago. The startup we worked for was acquired by a larger company, resulting in a lot of changes. Eric was promoted to a management position, which meant longer hours and more stress. At first, I was proud of his success and tried to be supportive, even when he'd come home late or have to work weekends. Around that time, Eric's behavior started to shift. He became very protective of his phone, often taking calls in another room or texting at odd hours. When I asked about it, he'd brush it off as work stress. He also started going out more with his work friends, but was vague about who he was meeting or where they were going. I tried not to let my imagination run wild, but doubts started creeping in. Eric and I had always been so close, and suddenly it felt like there was this growing distance between us. I suggested couples counseling, thinking maybe we just needed help reconnecting. Eric reluctantly agreed, but after a few sessions, he said it wasn't helping and didn't want to continue. During this time, I threw myself into my own work and hobbies as a distraction. I started training for a marathon, spending hours running to clear my head. I also took on more responsibilities at work, earning a promotion to project manager. Despite these personal accomplishments, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off in my marriage. Things came to a head about 2 years ago. I had taken a half day at work, wanting to surprise Eric with tickets to a concert he'd been talking about. When I got home, I heard noises coming from our home office. I slowly pushed open the door to find Eric in a compromising position with a woman I'd never seen before. The next few hours were a blur of tears and shouting. Eric confessed he had been having an affair for the past 8 months with a coworker named Ashley, 28F. He swore it didn't mean anything and begged me to forgive him. I was too hurt and angry to even process what he was saying. I grabbed some clothes and went to stay with my sister. Over the next few weeks, Eric's family reached out, constantly trying to convince me to work things out with him. His mother Karen was especially persistent, showing up at my workplace and even cornering me at the grocery store to plead Eric's case. She kept saying things like marriage takes work and everyone makes mistakes. I felt overwhelmed and pressured by their interference. When I finally agreed to meet with Eric to talk, I was shocked by his attitude. He seemed more concerned about how a divorce would impact his career and family's image than actually being remorseful for betraying me. He talked about how embarrassing it would be to tell people we were splitting up and how disappointed his parents would be. It became crystal clear to me in that moment that reconciliation wasn't an option. I filed for divorce soon after. Eric and his family were furious, calling me selfish and unforgiving. Vanessa, who I had considered one of my closest friends, suddenly turned cold. She spread rumors to our mutual friends that I had been frigid and neglectful, pushing Eric into another woman's arms. I was hurt and bewildered by her betrayal. The only person from Eric's family who stood by me was Nathan. He confided that he had suspicions Eric was cheating but didn't want to get involved without proof. While I was hurt he hadn't said anything earlier, I appreciated his honesty and support during such a difficult time. The divorce process was nasty. Eric tried to paint me as unstable and money-hungry to get a better settlement. He claimed that my obsession with work and running had pushed him to cheat. His family, led by Vanessa, embarked on a smear campaign against me. I lost many friends during that time, people I had considered close for years who suddenly believed I was some kind of gold-digging shrew. I threw myself into my work as a coping mechanism, taking on even more responsibilities at the office. My boss noticed my increased productivity and gave me another promotion, which was a small bright spot during an otherwise dark time. I also started seeing a therapist to work through my trust issues and rebuild my self-esteem. After months of legal back and forth, the divorce was finally finalized 6 months ago. I was able to keep our house and got a fair financial settlement, much to Eric's chagrin. I thought that would be the end of my involvement with Eric and his toxic family. But last month, I got a hysterical call from Karen. Through her sobs, I managed to piece together that Eric had gotten Ashley pregnant and they were now engaged. Karen was beside herself about the scandal this would cause in their social circles. Then, to my utter disbelief, she actually asked me to consider taking Eric back to avoid embarrassment to the family. I was stunned by her selfishness and audacity. This woman, who had once treated me like a daughter, was now only concerned about keeping up appearances. I firmly told her that Eric was no longer my problem and to never contact me again. Then I blocked her number. Since then, I've maintained no contact with Eric's entire family except for Nathan. He's kept me updated on the drama unfolding, though I've asked him not to share too many details. Apparently, Eric and Ashley's hasty engagement has caused a huge rift in the family. Vanessa especially is furious about welcoming the other woman into the family. There's also speculation that Ashley's pregnancy timeline doesn't add up. Nathan overheard a heated argument between Eric and his parents where they accused him of getting Ashley pregnant while he and I were still married. Eric vehemently denied this, but given his history of lying, who knows what the truth is? Part of me feels a twisted sense of vindication that Eric's actions are coming back to bite him. The family that was so quick to blame me for our divorce is now dealing with the real consequences of Eric's behavior. But mostly, I just feel relieved to be away from all the toxicity. I'm focused now on healing and moving forward with my life. I've continued with my marathon training, finding it to be great therapy. I recently completed my first full marathon, which was an incredibly empowering experience. I've also joined a support group for divorcees where I've made some wonderful new friends who understand what I've been through. Recently, I've started seeing someone new. We met at a local running club and hit it off immediately. It's still very early days, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the possibility of a healthy relationship. I'm taking things slow and being cautious with my heart, but I'm hopeful for what the future might hold. Looking back, I can see now that ending my marriage was the best decision I could have made. As painful as the process was, it freed me from a relationship built on lies and a family that valued appearances over honesty. I'm proud of myself for having the strength to walk away and start over. Whatever challenges come next, I know I have the resilience to face them. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post and unfortunately, the drama with my ex and his family has continued to unfold. I really hoped I was done with all of it, but some new information has come to light that I felt I needed to share. A couple of weeks ago, I was at my usual Saturday morning running group when I spotted Ashley stretching nearby. My heart started racing and I quickly tried to turn away, but she called out my name. To my shock, she apologized profusely for the affair and begged me to hear her out. Against my better judgment, I agreed to get coffee with her after our run. We met at a small cafe near the park. Ashley looked nervous and kept fidgeting with her cup as she started talking. What she told me turned my world upside down. Apparently, she and Eric didn't just start their affair 8 months before I caught them. It had actually been going on for over 3 years. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. 3 years. That meant Eric had been cheating on me for most of our marriage. All those times I had doubted myself or felt guilty for being paranoid about his late nights at the office. I had been right all along. But the revelations didn't stop there. Ashley went on to tell me that Eric's sister Vanessa had known about the affair the entire time. Not only that, but she had actively helped cover for them on multiple occasions. She would lie to me about Eric's whereabouts or create fake work emergencies to explain his absences. I was absolutely floored. Vanessa, who I had considered one of my closest friends, had been betraying me for years. It made me furious to think back on all the times she had comforted me when I expressed doubts about Eric's fidelity. All the while, she knew exactly what was going on. Ashley explained that she had only recently found out about Vanessa's involvement. Apparently, Vanessa had caught them together early in the affair. Instead of telling me or confronting Eric, she agreed to keep it secret to protect the family. Ashley said this revelation, along with finding out she was pregnant, made her realize how toxic Eric and his family were. She went on to tell me that she had broken things off with Eric and moved back home to be with her parents. The pregnancy had been unplanned and she was still deciding what to do. She apologized again for her role in hurting me and said she hoped that by telling me the truth, she could begin to make amends. I left that coffee meeting in a complete daze. My mind was reeling from everything I had learned. Part of me wanted to confront Vanessa and the rest of Eric's family about their deception. But another part just wanted to wash my hands of all of them for good. For the next few days, I went back and forth on what to do with this information. I barely slept, replaying conversations and events from the past few years, seeing them in a whole new light with the knowledge I now had. After much deliberation, I decided to reach out to Nathan. Regardless of my feelings towards Vanessa, I felt he deserved to know the truth about his wife's involvement in Eric's affair. We met for coffee and I told him everything Ashley had revealed. Nathan was devastated. He had no idea Vanessa had kept such a huge secret from him for years. He kept shaking his head, muttering that he couldn't believe it. At one point, he broke down crying, saying he felt like his entire marriage had been built on lies. I felt terrible for potentially blowing up another relationship, but I truly believe Nathan deserved to know the truth. He thanked me for being honest with him and said he needed time to figure out what this meant for his marriage. Since then, I've heard through mutual friends that Nathan moved out and is staying with a buddy from work. Vanessa has been frantically trying to contact me, leaving angry voicemails accusing me of trying to ruin her marriage out of spite. I've blocked her number and all her social media accounts. Eric has also tried reaching out multiple times. His messages alternate between apologizing for everything and accusing me of meddling in his family's business. I haven't responded to any of them. As far as I'm concerned, his actions and lies caused all of this, not me simply telling the truth. I'm still processing all of this new information and what it means. I'm angry all over again at the level of deception from people I once considered family. It's brought up a lot of emotions I thought I had already worked through about the end of my marriage. But I'm also trying not to let their drama consume me. I've worked hard over the past year to rebuild my life and I don't want to lose that progress. I've been leaning on my support system, my therapist, my divorce support group, and my close friends. They've all been incredibly understanding and helpful as I navigate these new revelations. I have a date this weekend with the guy from my running club. I was tempted to cancel in light of everything going on, but I decided I didn't want to let Eric and his family's mess overshadow my chance at happiness. I'm determined to keep moving forward, regardless of what new drama might unfold. In the meantime, I'm channeling my energy into positive outlets. I've signed up for another marathon, this time to raise money for a local women's shelter. Training gives me a healthy way to process my emotions and the fundraising aspect helps me feel like I'm turning this negative experience into something positive. I know there may be more twists and turns ahead as this situation continues to unfold. But I'm committed to staying true to myself and not getting pulled back into the toxic dynamics of my former marriage and in-laws. Whatever happens next, I know I have the strength to handle it. Update 2. It's been about 2 months since my last update and I wish I could say things have calmed down, but that's unfortunately not the case. The situation with my ex and his family has continued to spiral in ways I never could have imagined. A few weeks ago, I got a call from Nathan. He was clearly upset and asked if we could meet in person to talk. We agreed to meet at a local park, figuring a public place would be best given everything going on. When I saw Nathan, I was shocked by his appearance. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, with dark circles under his eyes and rumpled clothes. As soon as we sat down on a bench, he dropped a bombshell. After confronting Vanessa about her role in covering up Eric's affair, she had confessed to her own infidelity. Apparently, Vanessa had been having an on and off affair with Eric's best friend Mark, 40M, for the past 5 years. Nathan was understandably devastated. He said he felt like his entire world had been turned upside down. But the revelations didn't stop there. Nathan went on to tell me that after Vanessa's confession, he had started to question everything. He decided to do a paternity test and discovered that their younger child, the 4-year-old boy, was actually Mark's biological son. I was absolutely stunned. The level of deception in Eric's family seemed never-ending. I couldn't believe Vanessa had the audacity to judge me for divorcing Eric when she had been cheating herself for years. Nathan thanked me again for being honest with him about what Ashley had told me. He said it gave him the push he needed to really question Vanessa and their marriage. He told me he had filed for divorce and was fighting for custody of both children, including the son that wasn't biologically his. I tried my best to comfort Nathan, but I was reeling from all this new information myself. I felt terrible for the pain he was going through and for the innocent children caught in the middle of all this mess. A few days after meeting with Nathan, I got a hysterical call from Karen, my former mother-in-law. She was sobbing, saying that everything was falling apart and begging me to help fix things. Apparently, the news of Vanessa's affair and the paternity revelation had gotten out to the extended family. Karen was distraught about the family's reputation being ruined. She kept saying things like, "What will people think? And how will we ever show our faces at church again?" I was furious that Karen seemed more concerned about appearances than the pain her children had caused. I told her in no uncertain terms that none of this was my problem to fix. I suggested that maybe she should focus on why both her children turned out to be serial cheaters instead of worrying about gossip. Then I hung up and blocked her number. Since then, I've heard through mutual friends that things have gotten even messier. Mark's wife found out about his affair with Vanessa and has also filed for divorce. Eric is apparently furious at Vanessa for destroying the family with her affair, completely ignoring his own role in everything. There are ugly fights happening over child custody and assets in both divorces. The once close-knit family is now completely fractured, with everyone taking sides and slinging accusations. As for me, I'm doing my best to stay out of all of it. I've blocked numbers and social media for Eric's entire family except Nathan. He and I still talk occasionally as he works through everything, but I've made it clear I can't be his main support system. I'm focused on my own healing and future. The guy I've been seeing from my running club asked me to be exclusive last week and things are going really well. We're taking things slow, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about what the future might hold. This whole situation has been a stark reminder of why I'm better off without Eric and his family in my life. While I never wish this level of pain and drama on anyone, I can't help but feel that karma has finally caught up with them all. Update 3. It's been about 6 months since my last update and I'm happy to say that things have finally started to settle down. I haven't had any direct contact with Eric or his family in months, but I've heard bits and pieces through Nathan and mutual acquaintances. The divorces between Nathan and Vanessa, as well as Mark and his wife, have been finalized. There was a lot of ugliness around custody arrangements and asset division, but it seems like things are finally resolved legally at least. Nathan got primary custody of both kids, including the son that isn't biologically his. He told me he couldn't imagine not being a father to the boy he's raised for 4 years, regardless of DNA. I have a lot of respect for Nathan and how he's handled this whole situation. Eric and Ashley's relationship imploded spectacularly. Apparently, Eric had been lying to Ashley about ending things with me and starting divorce proceedings long before I actually caught them together. When Ashley found out the extent of his deception, she left him for good. Their baby was born a few months ago and Ashley has full custody. Eric is apparently fighting for visitation rights, but Ashley is reluctant given his history of lying. I ran into Karen at the grocery store last week. It was incredibly awkward, but she actually apologized for how she had treated me during and after the divorce. She said going through everything with Vanessa had opened her eyes to how unfairly she had judged me for leaving Eric. I appreciated the apology but made it clear I wasn't interested in rekindling any kind of relationship. As for me, I'm doing really well. My boyfriend and I recently moved in together and things are great. I've continued with my running, completing 2 more marathons in the past 6 months. I've also started volunteering at a local women's shelter, which has been incredibly rewarding. I've done a lot of healing work in therapy and feel like I've finally put the whole mess with Eric behind me. I'm grateful for the life lessons I've learned through all of this, as painful as they were at the time. I've grown so much as a person and have a much clearer sense of my own worth and what I deserve in a relationship. I'm sharing this final update mostly for closure. I don't anticipate having any more involvement or updates about Eric and his family's drama. I'm looking forward to the next chapter of my life and focusing on my own happiness. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice throughout this crazy journey. Here's to new beginnings and leaving toxic relationships in the past.